So Far Cry 7 and a brand new Far Cry multiplayer game is reportedly in the works. From VGC, Ubisoft is currently developing Far Cry 7 and a standalone Far Cry multiplayer game. That's according to reports from Kotaku and Insider Gaming, with the former claiming that Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot mentioned both games during an internal company update last week. Sources also told the site that Far Cry 7 is being made with Ubisoft's Snowdrop Engine rather than the Dunia engine used for recent series entries. Snowdrop powers Ubisoft's massive The Division series, as well as the studio's upcoming Avatar Frontiers of Pandora and its open world Star Wars game. So the Far Cry series is to use the Snowdrop engine is very interesting. The Dunia engine was actually very beautiful in my opinion. I mean, Far Cry 6 had some of the most amazing landscapes in a game. However, maybe they looked at what the advantages were in switching engines, of course. And maybe there is an advantage to the Snowdrop engine that will bring Far Cry to that next level in terms of gameplay and visuals. Maybe this will also allow Far Cry to have a third person option, which they kind of teased in Far Cry 6 in the hub areas. Like I assume the Avatar game and Star Wars game will have a third person mode. Probably I think the whole game would. It might. I always assume that those two games would be third person, but they could have a kind of a switch like Skyrim. Maybe that would be cool. And the Division games are also third person, which also use the Snowdrop engine as well. Also, I believe in making this decision. Perhaps it will be easier for the Far Cry games in the future if it adapts the live service route to continue update the game. Perhaps the Snowdrop engine is better for that. According to Insider Gaming sources, Ubisoft Montreal is working on both new Far Cry games, which were originally planned to be part of the same package. Both titles are said to be tentatively scheduled for release in the fall or autumn of 2025. There is also a report on Ghost Recon being released in 2025, but I will make a separate video on that. Far Cry 6, which was released in 2021, included online campaign co-op but didn't have a competitive multiplayer component. Former Far Cry boss Dan Hay left Ubisoft in 2021 after a decade at its Montreal studio, where he was credited for overseeing the series during the most prosperous period. He's now heading up Blizzard's new survival game. Ubisoft said this month that it had cancelled 3 unannounced games and was planning to strengthen its focus on its biggest brands and live services following weaker than expected software sales over the holiday season. So perhaps one of those cancelled games was the spin-off Far Cry 6 title, and also with the Far Cry boss Dan Hay leaving, perhaps there was no one to really immediately fight for a Far Cry 6 spin-off or to lead that project and immediately go straight into the next mainline game. Perhaps the team wanted to do the next mainline game instead of going with the Far Cry 6 spin-off, as well as creating what seems to be a separate extraction-based shooter multiplayer game. There was belief that this Far Cry 6 spin-off could have featured Vaas, as his future was teased multiple times in Far Cry 6 and its DLC, so maybe we could still get a spin-off this year. I just hope that maybe. Otherwise, perhaps plans for that have been scrapped, or the plans for that could have been transferred to Far Cry 7. So Far Cry 7 to feature Vaas as the main character or as the main villain. I think we definitely need Vaas back. I think Far Cry 3 being the biggest game, having him back in a major role in Far Cry 7, that would be so interesting. You can put him on the cover. You can have that kind of same style of cover Far Cry 3 in a new setting and kind of have that nostalgia, but also having the future of this game and really teasing this massive, probably the most well-known Far Cry villain in Far Cry history on your next game's cover, in the prominent role of the next game's story, and having just amazing, whether you play as him or being the villain. I just really want Vaas back. I really want him back, and I hope they can give him a really good story for the next game as well. The company said it's facing major challenges as the industry continues to shift towards mega brands and long-lasting titles that can reach players across the globe, across platforms and business models. Ubisoft said it has spent the last few years attempting to adapt its leading franchises Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, and The Division to these converging trends. You know, they're trying to adapt them into movies and TV shows and animes and mobile games and all that kind of stuff. However, the games from this investment phase have yet to be released, while our recent launches have not performed as well as expected, it said. Ubisoft does seem to be in a slump at the moment. Last year was an abysmal year for Ubisoft releases, hardly anything of significance. I don't think there was anything of significance except for Dawn of Ragnarok, which was an expansion to Valhalla. I heard a quote from a video that said Ubisoft used to be trend setters and now they are trend chasers, as they did have a ridiculous number. I think they had like 12 battle royale games in development at one time. And this was only like 2-3 years ago that they had all these plans to make these battle royale games in their, you know, their biggest franchise. So there must have been an AC, Far Cry, Ghost Recon we already know of. I'm sure there was a Far Cry. Far Cry, they had like a battle royale mobile game, which they did release. I forgot what the game was called now, but they did release it. But it's not taking like the Far Cry name. It's kind of like its own small brand, I guess. Rainbow Six and The Division probably would have had battle royale modes as well, and they had a lot of other projects in the work as well. So that is just ridiculous. That is ridiculous. 12 battle royale games in development at once, just because Ubisoft wanted to just capitalize on Fortnite and what was PUBG before Fortnite as well. Like, come on. Nope. What? It's ridiculous. They lost their creativity. Their AC games have lost their heart. Their Ghost Recon game, as much as I love Wildlands and Breakpoint, lost the true essence of Future Soldier and Advanced Warfare to favor an empty online open world RPG like game. That's what the Ghost Recon franchise has become. As much as I do still love that, I really do love, especially with the updates they made to Breakpoint and what the game is today. When it first came out, it was terrible. It was terrible. Splinter Cell is MIA. Far Cry is a copy and paste of the same game every single year with a new beautiful map. And have you seen Skull and Bones? Skull and Bones, what could have been this amazing new franchise for Ubisoft. It had so much potential. When it was first when it was first announced, and that first gameplay teaser that they gave, I forgot what year, I think 2016, maybe 2014. It was like Black Flag. That was the concept of it. It was Black Flag. It was Assassin's Creed Black Flag as a new IP, pirate centric. And the way it looked in that gameplay demo as well was absolutely incredible. And what it's becoming, you can't even go out and explore islands and stuff. Like, I just don't understand why they would even make that decision with Skull and Bones. And now it's been delayed again indefinitely. And it was literally supposed to come out, I think, in March or February or March. It's something like, I don't know what's wrong with these people. I don't understand what's wrong with them that they would even make that decision. The person behind Skull and Bones would take out the ability to go, or like not even include it in the first place, to go out and explore islands. But we need to get back to the old Ubisoft. We need to get back to the creativity, the bold games. Did you know that Ubisoft even made a Last of Us style game called I Am Alive? I just found that out like recently because of a YouTuber's video that's been blowing up recently. If you write I Am Alive Ubisoft, you'll see his video, and it should have The Last of Us in the thumbnail. It says something along The Last of Us. It says the Ubisoft of Us or something like that. And I took a look at that video and I was just like, wow, where are these types of games gone? Where are these kind of bold ideas gone? Like the art style of it as well. The art style of that game was pretty good as well. And like the Prince of Persia games and everything, it's just, I want that. I want those IPs. I want those types of games back. And they don't make a profit on those games, so that's why they don't make those games. That's why they've gone to the live service games, so that these other games are axed, and the main goal is to squeeze every second and penny out of its consumers in a bland open world repetitive game. So one of my favorite Ubisoft franchises is the Far Cry series, and I wanted to know more information about when exactly are we going to be getting Far Cry 7 or the next Far Cry game, whatever it may be, especially after I did seemingly enjoy Far Cry 6. However, I thought that there wasn't enough of the main villain Giancarlo Esposito in the game, where I thought that the game would be very heavily based on him, but it wasn't, because I guess he was too expensive, and you kind of see him at the beginning and then more towards the final missions of the game. So in terms of Far Cry 7, where is it? Well, according to comicbook.com, they say that Far Cry 5 was Ubisoft's best-selling game last generation, so talking about PS4 and Xbox One. Despite being divisive among both critics and consumers, unfortunately Far Cry 6 didn't carry forward this momentum, and it does seem like that, according to a lot of YouTubers and their videos, that a lot of people did not find Far Cry 6 favorable. It was just more of the same, is the saying I heard a lot of them say, and I personally would agree with that, definitely. It doesn't seem to have sold as well, and its reception was far from the highs of the series has seen with previous games such as Far Cry 3, the best Far Cry that would be, and Far Cry 4 was great. It wasn't that bad either. That said, Far Cry 6 doesn't change the fact that it's still one of Ubisoft's biggest series, and it's obviously going to continue, whether with another mainline game called Far Cry 7 or something new and different, which we'll get more into a little bit sooner in the video. The key here though is that it's not even being revealed, and yet we are already hearing reports that it's having some form of development issues and is missing milestones. There's no way to know for sure, but the hints at a game that's at least a few years away. So why is this game having some development issues and missing milestones? Well, according to GamesBeat on November 11, 2021 through Twitter, Far Cry creative director Dan Hay is leaving Ubisoft. And then Jeff Grubb, who is a known and reliable insider, he says that Dan Hay was overseeing the next Far Cry, which is intended as a Far Cry live service project similar to Assassin's Creed Infinity. Now, Ubisoft made a statement on internal delays according to Kotaku, and they said, "We don't comment on rumors or speculation," reads the reply. Ubisoft has unmatched creative and production capacities with more than 20,000 talented people collaborating across our global studios on game development. Thanks to them and to our long-term approach and appetite for taking creative risks, we have built some of the industry's strongest proprietary brands and have promising new brands and projects on the horizon. We also have one of the industry's deepest and most diversified portfolios, cutting-edge services and technologies, and a large and growing community of engaged players, and that they most certainly do have. As a result, we're ideally positioned to capitalize on the rapid industry growth and platform opportunities that are emerging right now. So they never really gave much more details. They're just kind of like bigging themselves up a little bit. So they never really gave any insight to what's actually going on, but I guess we're going to have to take Jeff Grubb's word, who is very reliable, and the fact that it does seem like fact that Dan Hay and their creative manager the head manager on the Far Cry series has left, and that is what's causing the problems over in the development sphere of the next Far Cry mainline game. Now, what is the potential of the next Far Cry game? What could it be? Is it a mainline game or is it a spin-off game? If we look at past Far Cry games, Far Cry 4 having the spin-off game Far Cry Primal, Far Cry 5 having New Dawn, Far Cry 6 seemingly should get a spin-off title towards around probably the end of 2023, and maybe we could see Far Cry 7 during 2024 or 2025, but I think we might even get that a little bit later, and I think they want to let the Assassin's Creed Infinity stuff come out and see what the reception and how it goes and how smoothly this whole process of the Infinity landscape and the Infinity infrastructure is handled, and how they can convert that or copy and paste that into the Far Cry franchise. Now, I thought that Far Cry 6's Lost Between Worlds DLC, which came out December 6, 2022, alongside a Game of the Year edition, was going to be the kind of spin-off sequel and that Ubisoft weren't going to actually make a spin-off game, but rather keep on introducing DLC expansions, and Lost Between Worlds seemed, before we got gameplay, before we got the reveal, it seemed like this could be the new spin-off game, and it continues the story of Danny. However, this was still kind of like a roguelike DLC, similar to the DLC which was featured with villains in the season pass of Far Cry 6, which still makes room for a Far Cry 6 spin-off game. I mean, they could still use these assets in the beautiful, beautiful world of Far Cry 6. I would definitely pay top dollar, or not top dollar, mid-range dollar for a Far Cry 6 spin-off game. And all signs point to a Vaas Montenegro spin-off title. Now, Vaas was heavily teased at the end of Far Cry 6's main campaign. He also had a secret ending in his DLC, as well as appearing at the end of the Stranger Things DLC. Now, I feel like with them designing an old man Vaas and kind of teasing Vaas, it would only make sense in order to reuse the assets of Far Cry 6 is to give Vaas a spin-off game. Whether you play as Vaas or someone alongside Vaas, where we can kind of see more of the acting and performance capture of Michael Mando as the character Vaas. I would really love a story about redemption and addiction to violence in terms of Vaas, his character arc and what he may do. Also, I think there's room to explore multiple endings. Perhaps you get an ending where he can team up with the island of Yara's Libertad, team up with Danny or meet Danny in a mission or in a couple of missions, or choose the route of violence and rage. Michael Mando also states in a Dan Allen gaming podcast he would like to go back to discover who Vaas was before he went insane and before the Mohawk, and kind of like his origin story. And I think that would also be a very cool way to go in terms of Vaas. But I would also say that I don't think they would do that with a spin-off game. Again, they would have to reuse the assets, and I think just continuing to have this present day Yara and Vaas on this island and to see what he does next. I think they kind of teased a sequel story to Vaas and what he's up to now, rather than going back to before he became crazy. And I would like a prequel kind of game of Vaas, but I would also say you could add flashbacks and all that kind of stuff into the sequel game and kind of explore Vaas's character in depth with a sequel spin-off Far Cry game centered around Vaas Montenegro. So that's the spin-off game. What about the mainline Far Cry game? Well, as previously stated before, Jeff Grubb says that Dan Hayes left and he was kind of front and center in spearheading the next Far Cry game, Far Cry 7. And it seems like they are going to be going the live service route. Now, according to Games Radar, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier has said that fans should expect something very different from the 7th mainline game in the series. Speaking on his Triple Click podcast, which he co-hosts, Schreier said of a Far Cry 7, "From what I have heard, if I remember correctly, they're aiming to go a radically different direction for Far Cry after Far Cry 6. So I think it only makes sense that they are going to be going the same direction as the Assassin's Creed franchise. Now, if we look at the Assassin's Creed model of their upcoming games and their kind of strategy on how they're going to be releasing these next Assassin's Creed games, the next game is Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is a smaller, more OG style Assassin's Creed game which is coming in 2023. We've got Assassin's Creed Jade, a mobile open world game which has recently had leaks online, so you can actually go ahead and look at how this is. And I gotta say, this is a true Assassin's Creed game. This is an RPG similar to how their Valhalla, Odyssey, Origins has been, but on mobile. So the mobile landscape is going crazy with these graphics. We've also got Assassin's Creed Nexus, a VR game. We've also got Assassin's Creed codename Invictus, which is a multiplayer focused game. So we may be getting a standalone multiplayer game similar to how the multiplayer components were for past Assassin's Creed game, like Assassin's Creed 2 and 3. Then we have Assassin's Creed Infinity, which is the big one, which will seemingly be a live service hub where you can access your purchased Assassin's Creed games, which will first be Assassin's Creed Red, which seems to be coming out in 2024, and then Assassin's Creed Hexe, which is coming out in 2026 supposedly as of right now. Now this is massive for Assassin's Creed, and I think they're going definitely in the right direction. Instead of trying to bundle everything into one game to try to please everybody, now they're kind of making separate games to target different audiences, and Far Cry could definitely take the same approach. I mean, the formula for Far Cry for the past games has been very copy and paste, and that's one of the issues people have had with Far Cry 6, saying it's more of the same. Now this would definitely work through an Infinity style hub, as you can have different maps, expansions, all linking to the same kind of storyline. And in terms of focus storylines like Far Cry 3 with its amazing characters, perhaps they can implement it in the Infinity games, or even make standalone games like how Assassin's Creed Mirage is a standalone game that is trying to target those original Assassin's Creed style games and trying to please those players. So for them to make smaller Far Cry 3-esque style games alongside their main Far Cry 7 games and maybe its potential expansions and maps would be a cool way to go. But we're going to have to wait to see how the Assassin's Creed franchise performs over the next couple years. And I think with Dan Hay leaving, we're going to have to wait a slightly more longer, maybe 1 to 2 more years longer than we were originally going to have to wait with him on board. I also hope to see a 2023 tease for the future of the Far Cry franchise. This also opens the door for constant updates on the same maps for years to come via the Infinity style hub, and maybe some very unique style games. How Assassin's Creed Hexe will be something new that we've never seen before. Maybe Far Cry could also get these kind of Hexe style expansions in the form of the Infinity style games. So for those who want that original Far Cry experience, there seemingly is an original Far Cry sequel in the works by modders. From ggrecon.com, fans of the original Far Cry game have banded together and started work on an unofficial sequel to the OG title. One modder has been working on Far Cry Returns, a conversion mod of the game that introduces all new mechanics, animations, and a brand new story to make it feel like a true successor to the FPS classic. The creator of the mod, Leone, has hinted that the game will be coming with all new locations too, and that the project will include a takedown mechanic to make those stealth kills that little bit more satisfying. It's unofficial, but it should be a lot of fun. So what approach should they take with the villains in Far Cry 7? Now, Giancarlo Esposito of Far Cry 6 was hardly in the game, and that was one of the biggest disappointments I had. However, if they're going the live service route for the next game, I think a Thanos style villain who is kind of in the background behind these major antagonists for maybe the next 2 Far Cry games could be a very cool idea for them to take, and we kind of see him and he's in the background. He's not very prominent in the first 2 games, but maybe in the third kind of iteration, that's when we finally go after him, and it's kind of like this 3-game massive plot point where we just are trying to figure out who's behind it all, and there's teasers in the first 2 games, and then finally in the 3rd game we have an all-out war in this epic scale. I mean, that's so Far Cry to go crazy action movie-esque style with their kind of feet, and maybe they could take inspiration from Avengers Infinity War and Endgame with the action sequences and the kind of style of the final Far Cry game in this supposed, my theoretical trilogy of Far Cry Infinity games. But also, of course, I want each game to feel whole and satisfying and not kind of left feeling, oh, we're not actually killing the main villain. No, I want satisfying underbosses in a way, kind of how Loki was an incredible villain for Avengers. I want a Loki style villain, and I want a different style villain for number 2, and I just want really big, amazing personalities for these villains. That's the main takeaway. I want those amazing personalities that a lot of these villains have in the Far Cry games in the past. Also, it seemed like Ubisoft was teasing third person in Far Cry 6 in their bases, where the camera would just automatically go into third person when you enter the kind of hub area. So I think that would be kind of cool, even though it's mainly a first person game. Why not just add third person? Why not? We can toggle it on and off. It's no big deal. I would love to play a Far Cry game in third person anyway. Now, Far Cry 6 also had some very cool tie-ins with Stranger Things and Rambo missions, and I think that Rambo actually appearing in games like Mortal Kombat 11 and Call of Duty Warzone recently, he would really fit the Far Cry series. So maybe even having Sylvester Stallone in a couple missions, or I would even say let's make him the main guy in Far Cry, but of course that would never happen. But I think that would be cool to have Rambo as a main character in the Far Cry universe. But maybe characters like John Wick, Terminator, Predators or Aliens could turn up in the games as side missions or DLC, and hopefully even some free cosmetics, but we know Ubisoft ain't gonna give anything away for free. So release date, I'm thinking Far Cry 6 spin-off will probably come by the end of 2023. It's likely if they do continue their previous tradition. And Far Cry 7 maybe after the release of Assassin's Creed Infinity, definitely to see how that performs. But maybe we're looking at 2025 to 2026, and maybe we will get continuous updates for the next spin-off Far Cry 6 game until the end of 2024. So that's what I think is going on with Far Cry and Far Cry 6 spin-off and Far Cry 7. And also don't forget that original Far Cry modded sequel, which seems to be a lot of fun. But guys, thanks so much for watching. Peace out, God bless, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos on this channel, and take care. See you guys.
Send the rocks across the pavement, hoping it will